Thanks, hon. My name is Karen, and I am an alcoholic. Well, when I saw Ina at that meeting, I thought, this is never going to last. But thank goodness I was totally wrong, and on her 1-year anniversary, I just thought she's here to stay, you know? And I'm so glad I was wrong, and I'm sure these folks are delighted to have you in their group, and I'm just thrilled for you, Ina, and I'm thrilled to be your friend. Thanks. I have these notes because I want to go somewhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours, and if I don't, I'll just be all over the place. So I'll try to have some semblance of order. It's been a long time ago since some of these happened. First of all, I will tell you my sobriety date, as Ina said, 27 years. It was December 25th, 1987, when I had my last drink. I was born in Springfield, Ohio, and when I came into the world, my parents had both been married before, and they each had 2 children who were college age at that time. My mother's 2 children lived where we did in Springfield. They were in college, and my father's children lived out in California, and I never did meet them. I was an only child for all practical purposes because I lived there alone, and it was an adult household, and I think I was a complete adult by the time I was about 3. You know, I knew all the rules. You don't do kids things, you sit here, you don't spill anything, you don't do this, you don't do that. So I got it. My father traveled a lot, but you know, they were in that stage of their life that he had a good job. It was after the Second World War. He had worked in the canvas business. He'd gotten very big during the war, so he was out traveling all over the place, and I was at home with Mother. A therapist of mine said that my mother was probably an alcoholic narcissist with bipolar disorder. Well, to a kid, she just wasn't a very nice or fun mommy. You know, she wouldn't talk to me, she'd get mad at me. There wasn't anybody else around, no brothers or sisters for me to talk to. So I spent a lot of time playing in the closet with my Ginny dolls, and it was just a very, sort of a strange existence. She didn't like me. She didn't like the way I looked, and she thought I should be happy-go-lucky, but she'd get mad at me if I laughed. So it was a really, really difficult thing for me to figure out. The one thing that made me really feel bad, though, was when she'd point out all the other kids who she did like. So, you know, that made me feel sort of bad. And she also didn't like the way I looked because my half-brother and half-sister both had blonde hair and blue eyes. And my dad had dark hair and dark eyes, and I then had dark hair and dark eyes. And she would tell people how I had his worst characteristics. I had her bad nose, I had his short legs, you know, all these things. So I never had a very good feeling about myself, and obviously was very self-conscious. Fortunately, I was a good student, so when I got to go to school, things got better. I didn't have any social skills, but at least I studied well, I got good grades, I had the teachers, you know, would let me do special things because I did the right things and acted okay, so that was good. The one bad thing there, though, was my mother didn't want to buy me my own clothes in grade school, so she had me wear her clothes, which really weren't very appropriate, you know, for a girl in grade school. Well, that was bad enough, but then my mother didn't use deodorant. So, she, you know, back then you didn't wash your clothes all the time, so it would just come out of the closet onto my body. So not only did I look funny, I smelled funny. So today when somebody says, you know, you spend a lot of time and effort on yourself, your hair, your clothes, it's like, let me tell you, there's a reason. Nobody's ever going to laugh at me again about how bad I looked or how bad I smelled. Fortunately, my half-sister, who still lived in our area, was very kind to me. She knew what my mother was like. When I asked her why my mommy didn't love me, she assured me that my mommy didn't love anybody. It wasn't just me. And she would take me on vacations with her family. My mother pretty much ignored me, so my sister would make her take me to the doctor, to the dentist, to things like that. So really, without her, I don't think I would have come through as sane as I did come through. She really was, and is my savior today. She's 20 years older than I am. She celebrated her 90th birthday this last summer, and I'm going to be going out there in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, it's still, I'm so glad she was there for me. The rest of the family get-togethers, everybody would talk politics, and of course they were drinking. So I can't imagine today what they would be like. But there was a lot of drinking, a lot of arguing. The next day, people would have had arguments. They wouldn't be speaking to each other, but they couldn't remember why. So you couldn't say anything because you didn't know who, it was just, but then everybody woke up the next day. They lived in their nice houses. They got in their nice cars. They had their nice jobs. And life went on. It was just something that you did. My parents, however, were daily drinkers. Every night when my dad got home, when he came home, they'd have their 2 Manhattans before we could have dinner. If he wasn't there, that didn't stop my mother. She'd have her 2 drinks at least before we had dinner. I got through grade school sort of unscathed, and I went to high school. And I hate the good old days. I don't know, did anybody really have a good time in high school? It was just, I had all these terrible self-image things anyway, and with the dating and all that, I just felt that, it just wasn't for me. Fortunately, I got to go to a girls' school, so that was a little bit, the dating and all that wasn't quite as big of a deal. And the emphasis was on academics. And I was a good student. I loved to study. I loved to learn things. So that part of it was pretty good. The one thing that I got pretty early, though, in high school especially, is that I wanted to make something of myself. I did not want to be a housewife like my mother. I won't go into all that, but I didn't want to do that. And I had an aunt. Aunt Nat lived in New York City, and we were still in Ohio. And she was chief of the picture bureau for Life magazine. Now, a lot of you in this room don't even know what Life magazine was, but it was the magazine of the day. And as chief of the picture bureau, it was a picture magazine. She had this huge job. So we would go to visit her in New York and go to the restaurants and the plays, and I thought, this is the way I want my life to be. I don't want to be stuck at home. So it was in my mind that I had to study, I had to go to college, I had to get myself ready for this kind of a life if I didn't want the other kind of a life. Well, the problem was my parents said they couldn't afford to send me to college. Well, this was a big part of the plan. I had to go to college. So my mother started a business in order to help make money so that they could send me to college. And my mother she found some business partners, and she treated them about as well as she did me and my dad, which was awful. There were all these arguments, the lawyers got involved, and it was just miserable. My dad still traveled a lot, so he got to stay out of it. And his feeling about Mom is whenever she'd do anything, I said, can't you please do something? She's doing this. And he'd just say, well, you know how your mother is, and off he'd go. So, yes, I knew how my mother was, but there she was. Anyway, one night after there was a meeting of all the attorneys and all the partners, and my mother had made this really big deal about how awful it was, and I really felt that it was my fault. If I didn't want to go to college, she wouldn't have to go through this. Her life would not be miserable. Once again, I was, ruining her life. And at the time I was 14, and I just couldn't deal with that horrible, horrible feeling. Sitting there thinking about it after they left, I went into the medicine cabinet, and there were sleeping pills in there. and I swallowed 2 full bottles of the sleeping pills. Well, they came home, and to this daughter who was, passed out, did take me to the hospital because there was obviously something wrong with me, where they pumped my stomach, and that was it. I was told never to do that again. So that was like, okay, I'm stuck. I've got to deal with this, whatever this is. There's no easy way out for this. So I still had to go to college. And I got to go. There was enough money, really there was enough money from my father, but there was also money from this business that I got to go. And I went to the University of Cincinnati. Lived in Cleveland at that time, go to Cincinnati. It's far enough away from home. This is a great thing. And I had high hopes. I really wanted to get into medicine. That seemed to be really a cool thing to do. I didn't have to be a doctor, but just, something in the medical field. Well, the problem was when I got to college, I really started to drink. And I drank every single weekend. I drank alcoholic from the first time I picked up a drink. I was an alcoholic. I drank to get drunk. I passed out. I couldn't remember it the next morning and could hardly wait for the next weekend to do it all over again. That's just, I never had any, slow progression up to it. I was right there. I wanted what it did. I wanted it to take me away, and it did. But I was able to graduate in 4 years. I don't know, well, I did. Do know how. I kept taking easier and easier and easier subjects, So, it was pretty much of a cakewalk by the time I got out of there. But I did have a degree, and I thought that would hold me in good stead. Well, so I graduated. It's 1969. What does a girl do when she gets out of college? Most of them would go home, live at home, get a job until they could do something else, like get married. Most people didn't even live in apartments back then. That was before women really did such things. They went home. I just couldn't do that. I couldn't go back home again. So I was dating this guy who was all right, so I married him. And off we went. And we moved to Michigan. He was older than I was, and he was going to teach up there at a college. And it lasted less than a year. Once we got off the college campus, we had absolutely nothing in common. It was just, we couldn't find anything in common. He liked to drink, but not as much as I did, so it just wasn't destined to ever go anywhere. However, that sort of broke the requirement that I go home. I had done this, so my sister, one of her daughters was in college then, and so I went home and I took her room and I stayed with my sister for a few months. Got a job with American Airlines, and got myself going to move to Chicago, fly for American, and get my own apartment there. So I almost had to go that route to get to where I wanted to be. So anyway, Chicago was a lot of fun. I lived near North, the bars, up and down the streets. Everybody, if you flew, you were supposed to be a good time. Everybody wanted to drink, and I drank, and somehow didn't miss too many flights. I drank. I got away with it. And that was going really well, but I still had this thing that I need a career. This flying around's fine, but it's not a career. And so, being a good student, I went to Northwestern at night to get a master's degree in finance. Very tricky considering my flying schedule and the fact that I was an active alcoholic. It was very, very difficult. But, I wanted to do it, I needed to do it. So that was going great until the apartment I lived in, this was a time when apartments were going to become condos. So it was really weird, anyway, they turned this whole apartment building into condos, and if I wanted to stay, I was going to have to buy a condo. I didn't have any money, they wanted $40,000 or something like that. Way back then, there's no way I could do it. Everything I went to school or just to keep going. So what did I do? I got married. See, if you want to get out of a situation, just get married. So, but this one was a really bad mistake. The other guy was okay, we just didn't have anything in common, but this one was really a bad idea. But before I go on with that, let me catch up on the rest of the family. Remember Aunt Nat, the gal, Life magazine, big job? Well, Aunt Nat got banned from a lot of nice restaurants in New York City. She would just get falling down drunk, and it was an embarrassment to the establishments. Part of her job was when they put the magazine to bed. I don't know, you probably know what that means, David. Anyway, the magazine was ready. It had to go from New York to Chicago to get printed and then come back. Anyway, and then she would drink on those flights and get really drunk so that sometimes she wouldn't know where she was or get back to work. Her life wasn't working very well. But she still had that job for quite a while. But this is funny. One time I met a guy who, just talking, and he said he had worked for Time Life when, Life was really the big magazine. I said, oh, Aunt Nat worked there. She was this and she was that. And I said, did you know? And he said, yeah. I won't press that relationship very much. So obviously she was well known in New York. Then I had my Uncle George. Uncle George was a big success he was my father's brother, and he had been a big executive traveling overseas. When you went overseas, your salary accrued here, and you got all your expenses paid there. So Uncle George just had all this money and this high lifestyle when he came back to retire. And one of the first things he did, he bought this big yacht, and he ran it into a bunch of rocks, and he lost his leg. I mean, that's what my family does. You want to celebrate? We celebrate. So, anyway, he obviously had a problem. My half-brother destroyed his pancreas with gin martinis. It was ugly. His kids suffered a lot. He and his wife would have drunken arguments, and somebody'd go through the big picture window. It was just really, really ugly. And at the time, I thought, well, 46 is pretty old, so he didn't work anymore after that. Unfortunately, he made a lot of money, so he could do whatever it was he did. But now, 46, it's pretty young to have to stop, the active part of your life. But he's still alive and on Valium. He's been on Valium ever since. So that works for that. My brother-in-law, my half-sister that saved me, her husband went to Betty Ford and did real well, thought it was, a great place to be, and didn't drink after that too much. I mean, if he was by himself, he would, but he didn't drink too much, and the rest of the time was a dry drunk. And there is nothing unhappier than a dry drunk. If any of you have ever had those in your families, I mean, you better drink. Being a dry drunk is just a miserable way for you to live, and I think it's a miserable way to treat your family. My father, who was more of an episodic drinker, he drank every day, but he didn't get drunk every day like I did. He just mostly at parties and stuff like that. But he did suffer from my mother's treatment, and he committed suicide at age 62. And again, now I look back at 62 and say, that was really sad. The great time I've had in retirement, he didn't get to have any of that. He just couldn't do it. And dear mother continued drinking from a bottle of bourbon in her TV room until she died. She hung in there. Okay, now back to my marriage that was not made in heaven. It won't surprise you that I chose someone who was very self-centered and self-absorbed. I'm used to that. It's not about me, it's about you. He was very critical of me. He would make fun of me in front of other people. And I just had such low self-esteem that, I just assumed that that's what I deserved. But I hated him. I really hated him. From the first time he did it, I hated it. So I spent a long time married to him, hating it. We moved from Chicago to Connecticut. I left American Airlines and with my degree in finance went to work for a bank. And I enjoyed that and had a fairly decent career there. My then husband had a good career. He commuted to the city. And we had the lifestyle of the suburbs, the nice house, the nice cars, the country club. Everything looked so good, and I was so miserable, just so miserable. I was a daily drinker. I passed out every night. And that went on for 15 years. I don't know how I did it. For 15 years, I hated my life. I went through the motions. I would do things that at work that I enjoyed at work, and then he would make fun of me in front of other people and the people I worked with, and it was, I don't know, I don't know how I did it that long. I guess I've been raised, to put up with that. One day, I'd had enough, and I thought, okay, I learned that there's no easy way out in this world. I'm stuck with this, and I have to do something to make my life better. I don't know if it's possible, but it may be possible. Unfortunately, fortunately, as it turns out, I knew I'd have to quit drinking in order to do it. And I just couldn't imagine how I would ever quit drinking in order to get my way out. But I knew it. I knew I had to do that. I saw a lot of therapists, a lot of psychiatrists. I've probably done the same. And this psychiatrist that I was seeing was a godsend for me because he said, I don't think I can help you with your problems. When I told him a lot of the things he said, you might want to try Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, actually, I have a patient that I'd be willing to call her if you want me to, have her call you and take you to a meeting. Well, it sounded like a really bad idea, but, what the hell. So she called me, I went, and that night was an anniversary meeting, and somebody from my country club, I know, was there, celebrating 17 years. And I thought, wow, this guy's got a big job in the city, 17 years, and he doesn't get it. The exact same thing of why, would it take a smart person 17 years to still try to get what's going on in AA. Then came the year of the big lie. I was going to AA meetings, and to my husband saying, I'm going to AA, I'm not drinking, and discovered all those little teeny tiny, we used to call them nips at the airlines, those little teeny tiny bottles, had them all over the house, everywhere in my car, was drinking those, going to meetings, trying not to drink until I left the meeting so those people wouldn't smell it on me. That was the most miserable year in my life. I don't know if any of you ever tried to do that, drink and pretend you're not drinking. I hear some laughs, yes. And who thinks you don't smell vodka? God. So anyway, I was getting more desperate then. And I was seeing a certified alcoholism counselor by that point. And this lady thought I needed to go away to a rehab. Well, come on. That just sounded like pretty harsh treatment for me, to have to go away. And, what would they think at work? I had this job and everything. I'd have to tell them. Oh, my God, I'd have to tell them at work. But she said she wouldn't see me anymore unless I did this. So, all right. She told me about Sierra Tucson. I don't know how much you know about rehabs. Sierra Tucson's one to go to if you have to go to one. In Arizona, it's beautiful, lovely. But the good thing was about it, I got it. Why I really, really love that place is that every single person there, no matter what their job was on the facility, was a recovering person. You had to be in recovery to work there. To wash dishes there, you had to be in recovery. And that got to me, of people who weren't telling me I shouldn't drink, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. They were sharing their experience, strength, and hope with me. They had done it. They were still living a fine life. There was a life after that. And I really needed that. She was right. I needed to be immersed, and I was immersed away from home, away from everything for 28 days, listening to what they told me. And to get a good student, I sort of got it, and I realized that I really could never drink again, and that was okay. But then as we were leaving, they said, all right, this is the discovery portion of your journey, and the rest of it is your recovery. You need to go back and go to AA. I just spent 28 days and how many thousands of dollars the insurance company paid for this, and I wasn't done, I just thought that was a real ripoff. I had to come back and go to AA. So I did. And one of the neat things is, the first, they do sort of a walkthrough of, okay, when you go back, be ready for this and do that. If somebody asks you this, what are you going to say? Well, one of the first things I did was go to my hairdresser because nothing, and my hair was a mess, and then I go in there and have the haircut, and he said, where were you? And I just popped out and I said, I've been on treatment for alcoholism for 28 days in Tucson. And he said, well, my wife and I have been in the program for 18 years. So that was sort of like, oh, okay, this reentry might not be so bad. I'm not the only one in this whole state that's ever gone away to a rehab and come back. The next few years were awful. When people say, oh, they came in and were on a pink cloud, I never saw a pink cloud. It was awful. Getting sober for me was really, really, really hard. Not drinking was okay, but my life, I did not know how to live my life without drinking. It was a mess. The marriage was actually, through sober eyes, worse than I'd even thought it was. I knew I had to get divorced. Unfortunately, it was a horrible real estate market. While we were getting divorced, we lived together for 2 years in the same house, under the same roof. This too shall pass was not helping my thought much then. Oh my God. That was really, really awful. I had no skills. I had no coping skills. I'd never learned them at home. Everybody was an alcoholic. That's what we did. I had no idea how you really faced the world and learned to deal with it on life's terms and act appropriately. I had no idea how to do that. All those insecurities and self-consciousness that I had sort of drowned with alcohol came back up again. I was just a walking mess. And one of the women who told me, I shared this at a meeting once, really captured this for me. She said, leaving one life and going to the life of sobriety is like walking out of one train car. And to get out of the train car, you have to let the door close behind you. And those doors, I don't know what they are like today, but they close hard. That one's shut. You're on this really shaky platform between the cars. To open the door in front of you, open that, and walk into the next one. I felt like I spent a year on that shaky platform, trying to let what was behind me stay behind me, trying to get enough equilibrium to go forward and accept the new life. It was just really hard for me. And, God bless those of you who say, well, it saved my life. I was on the pink cloud and I'm perfectly happy. That was not my experience at all. So if any of you are struggling, I did get through it, and I'm sure everybody can. Okay, after that, I made it to the other side. I found regular meetings. I was lucky to find some women. We were all sort of in the same group together, the same amount of sobriety. And one of them had a beach house, and that was really cool because, that was sort of the place that would coalesce around that and have a really good time sitting out some together. I started sponsoring other women, which made me feel more like I was giving back to the program, that I did have something to give. Started doing service work in Connecticut, and that was a lot of fun. And we had a really cool state conference there, and I started going to those. And it still amazes me today. The last one I was in was at Atlanta, the international, and to see that sea of recovery faces is just it's amazing to feel part of this whole community instead of this isolated little person who was never going to be able to be with the real world, who still drank. And life has gotten better. As many of you know, I married someone who was in the program. And before I did that, though, I worked with a therapist a lot. And we actually went to his and her counselors together and suffered together because neither of us had ever seen a good relationship. We've both seen awful marriages, and we didn't know how to do things right. So that was worth all the time and effort, because I did have a lot to change a lot. And it was his fault. It wasn't his fault. We both had to learn how to have a happy relationship, and it was worth every minute because we have a very happy relationship. We moved here 14 years ago. Before, I think I met you, Ina. But before we did, we lived in Connecticut. We came here and we rented a house for a month and went to meetings, because if the meetings weren't good enough, we weren't going to come here, So we did. We loved the meetings. We thought AA was really good here. We moved here in October of 2014, and 2002, and we had a New Year's Day party that year, and there were 50 people who came, and the cars up and down, the streets, and our neighbors wanted to know, if we just moved here, how did we know that many people? And new neighbors, it's really great. But, what a wonderful thing. That was one of the things that we were really going to miss about Connecticut, because there's a woman who had a New Year's Day sober party every single New Year's Day. And we said, aren't we going to miss that? And we said, well, not if we have it. So we decided to have it, and we have been doing that ever since, and love the tradition. I still go to 2 meetings a week at least. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor others. I think that's a very important part of the program. And it's always a hoot. I have one who has 45 years of sobriety, so it's nice to still feel needed, for someone in that position. I have a great marriage. I do lots of fun things. I play golf. I paint. I play duplicate bridge, as Ina knows. I do that. I travel. I did find a spiritual path. I never had one before. I had a religion that I didn't like, but today I have a spiritual path, and I do devote time and effort with that, and I go to retreats, and it's something I would have never had without this program. I volunteer at the Asheboro Zoo, and if that isn't a hoot, I drive up there. It's about an hour. And everybody I meet at the zoo is fun. They always want to talk about the animals, and I want to talk about that. So really enjoy that. I volunteer on service boards, and since I was in banking, I tend to be the treasurer of everything. That's always seems like a right thing for me to do. At a meeting on Tuesday, somebody said it was hard for them to relate to people who had double-digit years of sobriety. Well, it's pretty hard for me to relate this far away from people who have, a couple of days sobriety. So when people say, are you willing to sponsor people, I don't raise my hand, because there are people who are better able to deal with that. And the people I sponsor usually have a lot of years, and I feel that that's something that I can uniquely deal with that. But also about the double digits doesn't mean anything. If I don't come here and pay attention to what I need to pay attention to, if I don't live my life by, whatever these are, the traditions and through the steps, I've heard of people with 25 years of sobriety, and the waiter goes by at a wedding and they just pick up the glass of champagne as it goes by. And I just can't take that risk. You know, I want to come here. I never leave a meeting and say, oh, that was a waste. Never happens. You know, something good always happens. And usually, you know, I'm selfish. I come for me. I get what I need here. And I'll be eternally grateful to Bill W. and Dr. Bob for establishing what we have, this version of Alcoholics Anonymous today. But I really want to thank all of you, because if you weren't here for me with working the steps and the traditions, I wouldn't be able to be here. So I want to thank you all very much.